Hey, a surprise little video from Grave Assembly caught me off guard. I kind of wasn't hoping for anything to particularly watch today, as I'm gonna be needed in a little bit, so it's actually gonna be a fairly quick video today. I'm not gonna try and pause to talk too much. If I can talk while the video's going on, I'm going to shoot for that. So that does mean that me talking, it's going to overlap with the video's audio at a few points. If you haven't watched the video yourself, you probably should watch it first before you watch me talk about it. So there you go. Let's get on with the show because I am currently required elsewhere. But I want to get this quickly recorded.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve
and
from the
uploaded.
Total War community team, and I'm once again sitting down with some of the guys from the Warhammer development team to chat a little bit more about what's coming up in the future. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is being recorded before the release of patch 5.2. So even though we'll be talking about those patches and the kind of future of those patches,
5.2 is the one that added the deeps, right?
From now,
yeah.
we wouldn't have seen that because unfortunately we can't see into the future as much as we wish we could. So with that said, let's jump into some introductions. Rich and Sean, people have met you before, but do you want to give us a quick introduction as to who
Actually,
you are
you know what,
and
let
what
me...
you do?
I'm the game director for the Total War Warhammer series.
I can lower my my own
Both
personal
DLCs,
volume by
fixes,
touching my
patches,
headphone in
and
a
the like
certain way.
reviews. Fine, gentlemen.
It's neat.
And Sean, how about you?
Yeah, I'm the lead designer on the next project coming up.
Yeah, I want to set the
So
volume
I'm
up better.
focused
It's a little bit
primarily on,
loud. I
keeping
can
the
skip
team
over this. It's just them
focused and,
introducing
bringing everything
themselves.
ready for the end of this year.
Sorry, guys.
And we also... Awesome, thanks Mitch.
I'm
and
light
welcome
on
back.
time here.
So let's jump into a couple of questions about the next DLC. So in the last video we spoke a bit about the new
Yeah,
Legendary
corn,
Lords that
greenskins,
coming,
ogres.
Gave some
I know there's some
giving
people that think the
information there.
greenskins
Is
don't
there
need a
any
DLC,
update
and
how
on the
things are
unit
going?
side, they've still
Yeah,
got more
things are
options.
going really well.
On the campaign side, I actually
we
don't
are
like the greenskins campaign.
way into our production pipeline now. So
I think the
you've
wall
seen
mechanic is too
in the
much of
last
a
video some
win
of
to
the
win more sort of
creatures
mechanic.
and
There's not really
characters come
depth.
to life with some of the animations, and we're also now working on lots of our audio content as well. So how these things are going to sound. How we're developing our designs, which I'm sure Sean will talk a little bit about.
Are we actually going to see the units today, or is this still just another
rounding out,
another
development
update
process
video
where we're
that's
gonna
used to
iterate and then,
basically try and deter the fans
do
from
some bug
panicking,
fixing
from
and the like before
saying...
we get to release? So
Is this another video that's more or less just going to be saying,
Sean,
hey
how-
guys,
how
we
things
are
going from your
working
end?
here?
What are you doing at the moment?
Because
Well, we're
Lord
actually
knows Total
almost
War
at
fans
the
nowadays are
playtesting
quick to
stage now, so
overreact.
we've got it all together. It's a beautiful masterpiece that is filled with problems. So we will play test it. We'll iron out those kinks and we'll fix all the bugs. So yeah, we're just shifting into that phase now, which is for us the most important phase. So we'll be really relying on our QA team to give us lots of feedback, and we'll spend a lot of time playtesting it ourselves. But as we shift into iteration, what looks like an amazing idea right now, we'll play it and go like, oh, actually maybe we could shift it this way or that way, and that's where like the real magic comes together. And that's what we've learned over the years, that this is like the most crucial stage to get like the best product. So we are there now, and we are not wasting any time.
It's funny but a bit
So
sad how
a
many
word that you
videos
guys
there are where
both
game
mentioned
developers
there
more or less have
is
to explain to the
iteration.
fans how game
For
development
those who don't
works
know
to keep
what
the
that is,
game
what
fans
is
from
that,
going
and what is
berserk.
that stage when you're in game development?
So we have like a few key stages for us. So we have the pre-production stage, which is where we decide what we're making. We've figured out who the characters are, what's the goal, what's the pillars to lean towards. After pre-production, we know what we're making. We shift into production where we start producing it.
They were able to
make it.
directly show one or
During
two
that stage,
units
we just
in the
kinda
last
have,
video,
like,
weren't
the
they?
first
Something like the Thunder
So
Tusk?
once it all comes
No,
together,
I guess I don't
we
remember
then
them doing
play
that.
test that, and we go,
They definitely
okay,
showed a
what
few
was good,
concept arts.
What was bad? What maybe it's like completely the wrong direction. We think we've missed the mark. As we hit into iteration, that's where we take a.
I'm gonna have to skip over this. I'm sorry, but I'm light on time.
just really polish it out.
So let's look at these new Legendary Lords. Let's look at Gorbad. for the
Yeah,
first
it's the
one.
content that
Is there
I'm
any extra stuff
interested in
what
here.
you told us before? Any new stuff that you can
Not
talk
that
about today, regarding his playstyle mechanics, anything about him?
Yeah, I can go a little bit more detail. So last time we talked about how he was, this tactician that brings all flavors of the Orcs and Goblins roster together, and we've dug into that a bit further, and we've come up with a.
So
naming
Gorbad is supposed to be
progress
around Orc
for
Goblin
the plan,
hybrids.
which is a feature around Gorbad experimenting with what different units in the roster
That's
can
the
he pull
miniature.
together, and if those form a plan in his head, he can then create a unique strategy around them. So it might be, send out some goblins in front of the archers and they can pick up the arrows. And it's like, well, now you've got a way to regenerate your ammunition during the battle because he's got arrow catchers, go in and get it. Or maybe it's a more campaign-focused thing of like, what if I bring loads of wolf riders? Then I can do better raiding. So it's all ideas around experiment with your army, what units you bring.
So
and
encouragement
both
to
campaign
actually
and
use
battle,
low-tier units in the
interactions
late
to make
game.
them, quite different.
That
So
does
you've
sound quite
mentioned
cool.
units. Are there any that you can tell us about today?
Yeah, I think the
Fossil
unit
Squig.
I most want to talk about is the characters, the Savage Orc Shaman. So to go back to how we're always looking at the game and trying to find where it makes sense. For us, we thought
Finally
we have
a Savage
players
Orc
back in game
Lord.
Right now. Well, we've got lots of Savage Orc tribes.
I'm going to try not to pause too much to stop and talk, but sometimes I have to. It did bug me that you'd see Savage Orc armies in the game, and they'd be led by regular Orc war bosses. Didn't like that, so hopefully from now on, when you see, those Savage Orc hordes pop up in your territory, they'll be led by the shamans instead. That'd be cool.
In game, but none of them are being actually led by Savage Orcs, which they should be.
Yo, there we go.
Bring in the Savage Orc Shaman. We can right that wrong, and we can bring in a new bit of gameplay, but also refresh some old experiences and make it feel a bit more authentic to the Warhammer world. It's weird having a Savage Orc tribe led by an orc.
Yeah.
Now it's a Savage Orc, so yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, we wanted
got
to give that
sneeze.
flavour.
Yeah.
We had that in the past with Shadows of Change and didn't quite get that right there with Mother of Stankia. So yeah, absolutely want to make sure that you can role play out the armies that you want to build. And yeah, Sean was like dead set on getting this character in for you.
Yeah, when we brought in the Savage Orc, it did make.
How
us
long
take
are we
another
gonna have to
look at
deal
what
with
after,
Shadows
well,
of
if we're
Change
bringing in
hanging
another
over
character,
Crave
maybe
Assembly?
we should take a look at what he's up to. So we've actually moved him as well. So we've moved him from the Badlands down to the Southland jungles to pay homage to his origin in his 8th edition lore. And we're working on
That's
a little
cool.
nod
I like
to his
that.
connection with Gork and Mork and the Savage Orc tribe. So yeah,
Southland's
a new fresh
Vol has gotten
experience
even more
there,
crowded, but
something we're looking to do in other places.
honestly,
as
the
well.
end state of Warhammer 3 is that every
So
part
we
of the
wanna
map
see
is
your
going to be an
best
extremely
Rosette
difficult
dance.
mess.
The time will come, I'm sure. I'm sure if there's
It is one thing I think is a little bit doofy about the direction Total War Warhammer's had to go in the last few years, is that generally speaking, a lot of the fans that are vocal on the Reddit and the likes are fans who are going to be coming from Legend of Total War. Legend of Total War wants the games to be harder. And understandably so, I suppose. He breaks most of the mechanics down so that they won't be hard. So he wants it to be amped up. At the end of the day, his object is to break the game. And it leads to this position where Crave Assembly is really concentrated on making the game harder and harder and harder, which is understandable in some parts of the map, but it is rather noticeable, to me at least right now, that when you pop open the game, it recommends you either play Karl Franz or Tyrion first. And it recommends that because Karl Franz is like the main hero dude of Total War Warhammer 3. But he's actually a terrible choice for a first campaign. He has an extremely difficult campaign. He's surrounded by enemies, and he's got all the mechanics to deal with. Comparative to Tyrion, who has a few enemies, but nothing he can't manage, and his mechanics are relatively simplistic. I do wonder how much is the fact the fans really being hyper-focused on one issue, and Crave Assembly in response becoming hyper-focused on that issue, when there may be other issues besides that will get ignored, because the fans just aren't pointing them out. I do wonder how much of that goes on.
demand for it. So what about
Colossal
Goldbag?
Squig miniature
What's
on the
coming
table, by the way.
Down that line with the Ogre Kingdoms, is there more stuff that you can tell us about now?
Yeah, I can tell you some more stuff about that. You're pulling it all out.
I'm very heavily aiming at you today, Sean.
I'm in the crosshairs.
Yes, because you're heading this all up. You've got all the juicy details.
Yeah, I'll make sure I do a good job. So Goldfag, I mentioned earlier, he is the mercenary guy. So we have to make him a mercenary, right? Like we have to create the first proper mercenary faction in Warhammer 3.
Set up
so
Dogs of
we've got a
War.
brand new feature set now where you can take on Goldfag's contracts and you actually work for another faction. So if I create a scenario here...
It better have a reward higher than 300 gold.
We obviously had to deliver a mercenary experience. So for the first time in Warhammer 3, we're trying to create a faction that plays like a mercenary. So you will work for other factions. So in his new feature, Goldfag's Contracts, you can, let's say Carl Franz is having some trouble with Vlad.
Looks
and
nice.
He offers you a job. You can take on all his wars and go, okay, I'll work for you, Carl. You beat up Vlad and maybe Dreicher's causing trouble, or Kemmler as well. If you do enough good job for him, beat up his enemies, maybe gift some of the settlements to him, you can fulfill your contract and Carl will give you a nice big juicy payday at the end of that. So
Getting paid to
yeah,
gift
and
settlements to
we've
other
even tried to keep
factions.
it, like,
I like that.
you're a neutral party. You're just a mercenary. So a lot of the diplomacy that comes with beating up Vlad will actually get passed on to Carl. Like, you know, he's the one that hired you. It's not Golfag's fault that he's doing a good job. So at the end of that contract, maybe Vlad says, "Could you work for me instead and take on Carl?"
Interesting,
So
and they won't
we've
hold it
treated this
against
new
you as long as the
experience that
violence
he
was done
does
under
kind
contract.
of
That's
roam the world,
cool.
taking on the jobs and beating up anyone he fancies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another one at you, Sean.
Because
I don't
that's
know
the
if you
thing
can
about
guess what-
that's the thing about doing the mercenary contracts to encourage the player to attack other factions they wouldn't ordinarily, is that you can't really follow the mercenary contracts too hard unless you are wiping out, completely destroying everyone you're hired to have a mercenary contract against, because otherwise he'll just lead to the entire world being at war with you. And it's just part of how Total War... I think it's partly just the problem with Total War Warhammer. They program the AI to never surrender, to never seek peace. And that's a problem, I think, in general with Total War Warhammer. I know everybody says, well, it's Warhammer. It's nothing but war. No, that's Warhammer 40k. Warhammer Fantasy, peace happens. But nonetheless, I do think that's a wide problem with Warhammer Fantasy that can make the campaigns... with Total War Warhammer Fantasy, that can make the late campaign in particular, the mid to late campaigns in particular, kind of annoying. Comparative to, let's say, Three Kingdoms, where the AI was very good at seeking peace and trying not to get screwed, but at the same time, not being so stubborn that they'll never agree to peace.
Ask you.
Do you want some more content? Do you want
Maybe
a crumb
a
of
bit.
content? Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. Are we going to do this again?
We're going to
Just
do it
a
again.
little tiny bit of content about Khorne and Skulltaker. Yeah?
Sure.
No, that's enough.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, I'm a little bit sick, by the way.
I thought you were going to ask about another ogre piece of content, which I could say we're doing the Yetis, but I guess we'll go straight into Skulltaker. if you
Well,
want.
Yetis,
Yetis.
Thunder Tusk,
Yeah, the
there you
Yetis,
go.
but
Those are
we'll
the two
move on
units
from
that are
that.
missing.
Yeah.
And the Bruiser.
Tell us, you can cut that. Tell us a bit about Yetis.
The Yetis are like a monstrous infantry unit for the ogre roster. They are like quite ice imbued and come from the deep recesses of the mountains and the
That's
ogre
good art.
kingdoms,
I like
and,
that art.
To give them a bit of a difference.
I don't know why his
to gorgeous,
Pistolier's
real
catching
quite,
that, poor
aggressive,
guys.
charging in. The Yetis actually come with like a passive
Ooh,
debuff,
dual wielder.
an aura of frost, I think is our working title there. So you want to mix them into your roster in places to debuff the enemy so that your ogre balls can really hit them hard on the charge.
Are they really big or just big?
Just big.
Just big. Okay. Just one.
Yeah, big, furry.
They should also have high
As a
movement
Yeti should
speed, I
be.
think,
Yeah.
right? Because the Yetis are supposed to be the
Oh, are they soft and
anti-cavalry
fluffy?
unit of the Ogre
I
Kingdom's
wouldn't pet
roster.
them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's have a look at Khorne.
Mm-hmm.
Skulltaker.
Yes.
What new info can you give us?
Well, I think last time I told you that he's a champion hunter. You know, that's his probably gameplay role there. So
Ooh.
again, we've dialed into that on the campaign
look at
side
this
as
model.
well. With Skulltaker, he's all about hunting down champions, taking their skulls. And for us, we are trying to capture that with him. When he defeats characters in campaign, he will claim
Looks
a
good.
portion of their strength, some of their champion essence, which he can then use to imbue his Cloak of Skulls. And the whole idea of the feature is seek out, you know, powerful characters, defeat them, claim some of their strength, and empower yourself even further, so that you can become the ultimate Khorne champion and the ultimate champion of the Warhammer world.
Well, what happens if you beat Kolek and then go over and beat Sigvald? Because there's a big power difference between those two. Do you want to, as Skulltaker, beat one big legendary lord, but then avoid fighting other legendary lords in the future for the fear of losing the buff you got from fighting the first one? I don't think I'm understanding the mechanic correctly.
So it's literally a process of the more people you kill, the stronger you are.
Yeah,
Oh.
and if anyone starts to look pretty tough, well, you just kill them, right? And then
Yeah.
Okay,
take
so
their
is it a
strength,
meter
and
you
you're
fill
already
up,
also
and it fills
exactly.
based on
And it's just
on the lord
exponential
strength?
until you're champion of everything.
Yeah, until he's stopped.
They should give that mechanic to Wolfric.
alone.
Yeah, he's got
Does-
skulls everywhere. I was looking at the art the other day, our character artists have done, and even his sword on the blade, there are skulls etched all the way up there. The guy is fully stocked.
That's
Yep,
awesome.
Khorne ain't
Yeah,
a
it's
very
very cool.
original guy.
Units. Are there any new units or anything like that you can talk about for Khorne for this DLC?
Yeah, let's
see.
Let's talk a little bit about what we've got coming for them.
Slaughter Brute, definitely.
And I guess touching back on one of the other questions that you asked about how we produce and package up the content, Khorne's got something slightly different.
Slaughter Brute, certainly. Khorne's not going to get his end times units, is he? That'd be pretty weird.
Not too different, but slightly different in that we've been looking back in all the books and you know, the materials that were sent by Games Workshop, and what we're trying to do obviously is create parity across all 3 different strands of the DLC. You know, where you've got your legendary lord and legendary hero and so on. But with Khorne, when we came to look at what other options were available for some of the generic characters, they didn't quite have as much stuff on offer now as maybe what some of the other factions do, as we've been, you know, exhausting it through the various different DLCs and products. So Khorne's already got, I think, three kind of heroes in already, like the cultists and the like. So there was nothing really more to be added there. We do have a new generic lord though coming in, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the future.
Khorne won't get a generic hero. Weird. Okay. People are going to be upset about that.
But to fill that gap, what we're doing with Khorne is going to give you 2 legendary heroes rather than just the one that you've seen in past experiences. So greenskins.
So when you consider Karanak, Khorne's going to end up with 3 legendary heroes. Interesting.
And ogres, don't worry, they still fit the same formula as Thrones Decay. But Khorne, you're going to get 2 legendary heroes, and they've got 2 pretty cool ones, or I think they are. So first up, we've got Skylar Anthrogrim, which I think is one that you've all been talking about and expecting to see. We do have that brute of a Chaos Spawn.
Cool concept art.
Appearance with his massive, you know, ape-like stat.
Hold on one second. If Khorne gets a new generic lord, Khorne's already got Exalted Bloodletters, Exalted Bloodthirsters, Chaos Lords of Khorne, Demon Princes of Khorne. That's 4 lord types to his 3 heroes. If they add another lord type, then Khorne will have 5 lord types and 3 hero types. That's pretty weird. No other faction in the game comes that close to having that much of a lord to hero disparity, does there? I mean, in reverse, having more heroes than lords, there's Norska, who need another lord type badly. Tomb Kings need another lord type as well. Anyways.
And fists. He was a past Norscan chieftain, wasn't he?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so he's got all this pent-up rage and fury. He just wants to unleash it all. And then the other character, which maybe you're not expecting, but we're equally excited about doing, is Scar Bloodwrath. Now, Scar Bloodwrath is not an 8th edition character per se. He comes from the End Times.
The End Times.
So it made sense when we looked at Khorne, how we can get the best and you know, most exciting.
Okay, they've opened the End Times floodgates, which means Skaven players are going to want Storm Fiends. It means somebody's probably going to get the Morghasts from Nagash's army list, though I guess Nagash, we'll see how Crave Assembly implements them themselves. Dread Abyssals for Nagash for the undead as well. Yeah, that opens up a lot of possibilities. Well, now people are going to want Nurgle to get another DLC for the Glockkin. Huh. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Why has he got a skull hanging from his dick? That's messed up, alright.
Characters and units into the pack. And
he probably had that on the miniature too. I just never cared to look at the miniature because I don't care for most of the things added in End Times.
To have him. And it will make sense when we disclose some more of the content coming as well, why we chose him. But
so we are going to get Skull Reapers and
very brutal, very vicious,
Wrathmongers.
Yeah, very much strong followers of Khorne. So they'll be fun to play around with.
You mentioned a lot about kind of reference materials and things like that you've got, like the books and stuff from Games Workshop. So what do you use as your reference point?
Well, Mitch is really good. You know, one for digging through and turning over every stone and an idea.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think the start of every project is, you know, for me and I'm sure many others, just taking the army book of whatever you're working on and just reading through it. And then you pull out from the army books, loads of notes related to, you know, the characters, the units, and especially the campaign as well. You're always kind of looking for something unique, something interesting that you can pull out from the army book that you can then translate into gameplay. Obviously, it's a little bit more directly translatable with the battle stuff, but in campaign, you're always looking for something just a little bit, you know, unique, something that you can really, and it can be like something really small sometimes, that you can just kind of latch onto and turn it maybe into something quite interesting.
The army books are cool, but the RPG books are cooler.
So yeah, you're always reading through the army books, and there's also lots of other books as well, and other magazines and various source material that you'll just read throughout the entire project.
Yeah, they were stuck for
try and
options on
just
Corn, though.
really immerse yourself.
Well, I
in
guess it
in
makes sense.
whatever
This
it
is the
you're
one where they
working on.
have to open
So
up
is there,
in
like, a
times
secret library
because
somewhere in the studio
Corn
that
has
I've
so
not been
few unit options
All
when you
this
get to this
material, it's
stage.
like this treasure
No,
trove.
there's not a secret
Oh, right,
library.
yeah, no, there's
Oh,
not.
really? Oh, okay. You
What's
just take it
behind
home,
this
don't you, Sean? You take it home.
It's got my flat, yeah.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Mitch. Well, we've spoken quite a lot about the DLC now, and looking forward to sharing more info in the near future. Let's have a chat with you now, Mitch, and talk about what you've been doing with the smaller updates and the kind of interim patches and things like that, like 5.2 that we've just seen released. What's your approach to this? So how do you identify what you're going to work on, or what you want to add, or what you want to refresh and freshen up?
Yeah, so I think, as players know, there is a lot that we want to freshen up in the game, and we do quite a bit of that in the DLCs. But I think what we want to start doing more of is taking the opportunity to do that with the patches. So that's kind of the initiative we're starting now to kind of make our patches a bit bigger, a bit fuller. And in terms of what goes into them, we really want to be player-led. So yeah, 5.2 obviously came with a couple of things. It came with some new things, and it came with some fixes. And that's something I think we want to keep going forward. So we always want to try and add something new in the patches, something that you can say, hey, I'm going to come back and I'm going to try that new thing out. And you don't necessarily have to wait for a DLC to have like a new experience. So that's always something I think we're going to try and aim for. And then on the point of
So
tackling,
Lizardmen have to get a
fixing up
patch,
some old
right?
content.
Between big
There's a lot
updates,
of
between
it. Obviously,
DLCs.
we've got, a
They're the
massive
one that
amount of
spring to
content
mind
now,
immediately,
so,
because
yeah, we are going to be listening
Vampire
to
Counts
players
and
a lot.
Norscar are both behind. I'm talking
We've
over this
got,
guy because he's
a
having to
great
just
team
pretty well
here that
explain the
takes all of
basics.
the feedback from the community,
Vampire Counts and
and then
Norsca
feeds it to the
both
devs
need
like
updates,
us,
but they both also need
and we'll kind of filter
DLCs.
through that.
Lizardmen
We won't
aren't missing
necessarily
anything
always have the
unit
capability
roster
to
wise,
do,
but they do
exactly
need an
what people
update
are
to make
asking
their
for.
gameplay
So,
not be
for example, if people
what it
want
is.
to want us to do things like add new lords in these updates, that's probably not going to be something we're going to be able to do, and we'll focus maybe a little bit more on things like campaign features, fixing up old features, doing some reworks, maybe smaller reworks. Maybe if some of the patches, we'll do bigger reworks, maybe like a race rework if we can. There's going to be quite a bit of variance in these patches in terms of.
Well, there was a pretty big race rework already in patch
how the content
5.2.
we do
The
in them.
Deeps is a
And,
tremendous
again, we're
change to
gonna
the
be
Dwarf's
player-led.
playstyle.
Just because we're not going to do in these updates new lords and characters, that doesn't mean that for old content there aren't going to be any new lords or characters.
Talking about these things that you're reworking and working on, are you able to tell us anything about what's going to be coming next down the line in the next patch?
So that's a good question. As you noted at the start, we're recording this before 5.2 comes out. So probably what's going to be happening right now in our time, not in the viewers' time,
past.
in the past,
Yeah.
is we're going to be waiting to see the reception of 5.2. What would be really awesome is to start getting more feedback from players. What is it do they want to see? What content do they want us to go back and fix and update? And if they have even kind of, like I said, we want to do new stuff. So if they've got idea for new little features that they want to see in the game, it can be quality of life features, or it can be something a little bit more mechanical like the deeps, then we can look to do that. So at the moment I will mention a couple of things that are on our list, but the big caveat obviously is that plans might change. So what we're thinking of doing at some point will be a Bretonia rework. I think we have looked at them in the past, but they've still got quite a few things that I think we want to fix and update with them. Most notably, I mean, Rich always talk about this quite a lot, is the Green Knight. He's on our list for sure, along with
A Bretonia rework similar to the Deeps to give them more economic and campaign mechanic depth, without necessarily making them more OP, though Lord knows the Deeps can be OP. That fascinates me as a Bretonia player. I love Bretonia. I will say the Green Knight is not necessarily the thing I mentally jump to first as what I have take issue with in the Bretonia gameplay design. But I do understand at the same time why they feel they need to change the Green Knight, because he was the first legendary hero, and he is implemented in a weird, awkward way where you get so limited access to him when every other race gets access to their legendary heroes pretty freely. Even Gotrek and Felix have lost their temporary thing. So Green Knight, it definitely makes sense that Green Knight is going to end up being a mechanic that changes, where it's no longer perhaps that you get access to him temporarily at certain intervals, but perhaps just that there's a certain threshold you get him, and you get him permanently. I don't know. But, yeah, I understand why they would mention that in specific. And that's a thing that won't have a lot of speculation necessarily tied to it. There will be dangerous speculation. Because that is the thing with these developer videos, is that they have to provide enough for there to be hype, but they have to be careful not to give anything that will lead to dangerous over-speculation. Well, now I'm describing it like stock market issues. Over-speculation. No. The issue is that, generally speaking, fan bases, especially on social medias, where one dumb idea can be shot out into the universe and then picked up by 1,000 idiots, is that when one guy gets an over-the-top idea of what the next update could include, and then everybody else starts to pick it up, and they all start to get this idea that, oh my god, this next update is going to forever change the game to make it a perfect 10 out of 10, and then it doesn't, and there's a sense of disappointment, even if there was never any concrete basis behind the speculation, it was just over-speculation. So that's the thing that developers have to be careful with. So, I understand why they would go with something more simple and concrete to point out for a Bretonnia rework like the Green Knight. I would certainly hope it would be more than the Green Knight. At the same time, I don't think there are a lot of people that are that bothered with the Bretonnia campaign. Up until recently, I would have said it was better than the Empire campaign, easily. So, yeah, there you go.
Some other feature fixes for Bretonnia, so they'll be coming, I think, at some point. Also Kislev, I'll mention them. We've seen a lot of feedback. People want us to take a look at Kislev and kind of, update them a little bit. And then we also got some other smaller plans. So I think we've got a big rebalance of the ancillary system and a bunch of new ancillaries that we're looking to do in the near future. The Chaos Invasion, that's also something that we've seen a lot of requests for, which is definitely on our list to kind of...
An ancillary overhaul would be pretty cool. That's ancillaries are there's a lot of potential there for flavor and adding to the narrative of a campaign. But more often than not, ancillaries are just simply, oh, you picked up, Gravedigger. He gives minus 5% attrition from vampiric corruption. And you're going to look at him and go, oh, I guess that's neat, but I'm going to not take him over this guy that gives, minus 5% upkeep for the whole army or something crazy like that. And so you end up salvaging or selling a lot of those guys. Well, I don't think you can salvage ancillaries, but you end up selling a lot of the ancillaries. A lot of it, like, the Empire has like 50 ancillaries. When you look at the list, there are lists online of all the ancillaries. The Empire has an absurd amount of ancillaries, and they can't all be good. Most of them can't even be good. There's going to be a few, like the Notorious Student, who are just fantastic, and the others are just kind of garbage UI filler. So I'd like to see some kind of overhaul to that. I don't see them really getting rid of the idea of UI filler. It's just kind of the way ancillaries are in any Total War game. But I appreciate that they're going back and touching it, especially because there is such a wide gulf between the ancillaries of Warhammer 1, which are not that impressive comparative to Warhammer 2 or Warhammer 3's ancillaries.
Bring back in some form. Obviously, it's a little bit different now how we can kind of implement it in Warhammer 3 because all the big bad guys are already on the map. But I think there's some ideas we've got there. So yeah, that's a couple of things just to name, just to give you a little taste. But yeah, like I said, we will...
If they bring Chaos Invasion back, I hope you can turn it off.
We really do want to be player-led, so it will, plans might change depending on what it is people want.
As Mitch said,
This may just be me, but I prefer for the campaign to proceed somewhat naturally, rather than a forced end times event. But that's probably just me. I think that most people prefer to have a forced scripted event thrown on them so they can have a bunch of armies to deal with.
We're gonna try and inject variety of content into these updates. Hopefully you saw recently 5.2 we added a couple of Orc and Goblin units. There's other ideas around weapon variants, stuff like that, but that's the sort of thing that we're aiming for at the moment. Whereas characters like Egrim, I know people are after him, he'd be better suited to a DLC in the future. So yeah, please don't expect those in the...
Is Zinch getting another DLC?
Updates.
So this feedback that you're acting on from the community, whereabouts are you kind of compiling that from? Which channels that we have?
Doesn't have enough content for another DLC.
So we've got a fantastic player experience team here. Like I said, they kind of give us devs like really great feedback directly from players. So you can go on our official forums, our official Discord, and to be honest, most other social media, we'll find it eventually.
There's not really the units or generic lords or heroes for Tzeentch DLC. They couldn't be thinking of just making a, like, $5 lord pack that's just lords, could they? That'd be interesting, but there's no space on the campaign map for that quantity of lords.
And yeah, it's maybe not always obvious, but I can promise you we do get all of the feedback from players, and it is massively helpful in shaping, you know, not only, I guess, what I do in the updates, but just everything we do in general. So go there, leave all your feedback, it'll reach us, and then we can act on it.
Awesome. Yeah, feedback.
We do a lot of reading.
I bet.
And I wanted to stress, if there was a faction maybe you were hoping Mitch might have mentioned but didn't, don't worry. We've got a bunch of other, you know, plans and DLCs and things still to do. So we've got ideas around some of those other factions as well. They're very much on our radar.
Yeah, it's a good point that I guess it might not always be obvious kind of how we make the decisions we do in terms of what we do. So obviously we know better than players what our plans are. So we might know, you know, for example, what we might do in future. And that then might mean we do something a little bit different for an update, because we know in future this other piece of content people are going to want us to fix, or we've already got that on our kind of in our plans. Trust that, I guess, you know, even if you're kind of giving feedback and not seeing it directly action straight away, it is reaching us, and it's being seen. It's being seen. It's in the plan somewhere probably.
And that's all we've got time for today. So thanks to Rich, Mitch.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a pretty good little video. The big news to me there is, first of all, that Bretonnia is probably up for the next Between DLCs patch. I've been kind of discreetly hoping that Bretonnia would get a DLC, but at the same time, I guess I understand that from their perspective, Bretonnia was released as a free thing, so maybe they think they'll look bad to have a paid DLC for something that was initially free. Well, something that will stay free. I don't think they're going to abruptly expect people to go back and pay $10 for Bretonnia. But as a Bretonnia fan, I would have liked to see more Bretonnia units. I would have liked to see more Bretonnia lords and heroes. I'd have loved to see stuff like Haramults or Faceless. Faceless. That would have been interesting. But at the same time, you know, I'm definitely happy with just the update to make their campaign more interesting. The other big really takeaway there is the end times, which for quite a while have remained off limits and almost treated like a separate Games Workshop property. And understandably so. I think that while there are end times units that players want, that does not change that the majority of players do not want the end times to be canon. At the end of the day, the end times, I think by now, everyone involved in Games Workshop and Games Workshop's surrounding companies knows that the end times as they were handled were a mistake. That the end times have to exist fundamentally in order for Age of Sigmar to exist, and as a result, the end times will not be retconned. But at the same time, it's better to avoid talking about it if possible. Even with the old world. Games Workshop has repeatedly said, okay, yes, the end times is canon. It did happen. We're not taking that back, because we can't, because Age of Sigmar depends on it. But we've also made sure to set the old world well before the end times, so that it's distant and off on the horizon, and there are a few things that will remind you of its existence. You know, comparative to if, you know, let's say Balthazar Gelt was running around. Love Gelt, but Gelt was a very big player in the end times, and it's hard to look at him and not think of some of the stuff he did in the end times. But nonetheless, with that floodgate open, that does lead to a couple oddities, because I don't really see the Skaven per se getting another DLC. If they did, they'd have the craziest roster in the game. I guess they still have some things, like Rat Riders or the old parts of the old clan. How am I forgetting their names? Oh, Thrott's clan. Oh, well, my brain's just having a fart, so I'm not going to try. The clan that's up in Kislev, they operate out of the Hell Pit. They make all the horrible mutants, like the Chimera Rat. I guess there's still units to take from that list. Maybe the old Clan Eshin list, the old Clan Pestilence list. So, we might be looking at another Skaven DLC, which feels crazy to say, because they they'll be at 4 DLCs. Good lord. Nonetheless, I mean, they've got Thankwall, who people still want. So I guess it makes sense that Thankwall and the Stormfiends would come alongside each other. But yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean, it makes sense for Khorne. Like I said, it makes sense for Khorne. They had to open the floodgates. Khorne is Games Workshop's, favorite child, as the Chaos Gods generally go. Though Nurgle's been getting a lot of love for the past 5 or 10 years. But despite how Games Workshop favors Khorne over the other Chaos Gods, Khorne also has generally the most limited and limiting as well, I suppose, concept of where he's blood, skulls, murder, death, blah, 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 blah. And there's not a lot of depth beyond that. So in Warhammer Fantasy, especially where Khorne refuses to use guns except for the skull cannon, it can get really awkward for Khorne that everything just has to be melee infantry, everything has to be melee cavalry, everything has to be melee monsters, no ranged units, no spellcasters. So I understand them opening the end times possibilities, though it does, I guess, still raise the question of, well, we know 3 of the Khorne units then. Wrathmongers, Skullbringers? I don't know, something stupid. Khorne. Slaughterbrute. But we don't know the remaining 2, do we? Maybe I'm forgetting. Either which way, I need to go ahead and wrap this up, because I am needed elsewhere, so I will see you folks later the next time something comes up, or there's just anything I want to make a video about. See you then!